going to call this monthly regular meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education to order. We have 4 members present, myself, Jessica Anders, Noemi Custodia Laura, Patricia Mariano, as well as our student representative, Joseph Trinidad. I will just note that I believe the other members will be joining us shortly. If we can begin, as we begin all meetings, with the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be greatly appreciated. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As we do with all meetings, we take public comment first. I'll reiterate our policy under the emergency order relative to open meetings that allows us to hold this meeting with all members being present remotely, and that has been okayed by the governor's emergency order. We have, as a board, instituted a policy relative to public comment, because we want to make sure we have that, any members of the public may email info@lawrenceallianceforeducation.org, and their message, their comments will be read at the meetings. Those comments need to be received by noon on the day of any LAE meetings, and we will gladly read those comments into the record, and we will send copies of those emails to each LAE member. We have we received one email prior to today's meeting, and I will read that now for public comment. It is entitled Public Comments by Dr. Marianella Rivera, Table Coordinator for the Greater Lawrence Education Justice Alliance. And Dr. Rivera writes, I am deeply concerned about the March 25th school committee meeting being canceled and the lack of collaboration and communication between the LAE and our community's elected school committee members. On March 31st, the LAE demonstrated that these meetings can be conducted remotely without making attempts to involve our elected school committee members. As a taxpaying citizen of this community, I have a right to representation and demand that my elected school committee member represent me and my neighbors in these meetings. The Lawrence School Committee were elected to represent the people of this community and ensure our voices are being heard. It has become quite apparent throughout the course of this receivership that efforts have been made to silence our elected representatives' voices. While this may be legal under this receivership law, it is in direct violation of the Voting Rights Act, and it is a violation of our constitutional rights. This wouldn't be the first case of institutionalized racism in this country, and just because it's legal doesn't make it right. The Lawrence School Committee was labeled ineffective, and recommendations were made by local stakeholders on the turnaround plan to address this issue, but the LAE has failed to follow through with this portion of the plan. It was also recommended by previous school committee members to hold joint meetings in order to address the recommendations of the turnaround plan, but it was decided by the commissioner to decrease the meetings to quarterly, while also failing to uphold the law which mandates quarterly written reports to the school committee members on the status of the turnaround plan. The way our elected representatives have been treated is not only making them more ineffective, but violating the rights to representation for the people of Lawrence. I demand that my elected school committee members be involved in these meetings, and that their school committee meeting, school department is rescheduled ASAP. That is what we received for public comment. Again, members of the public who wish to give public comment at any LAE meeting should email info@lawrenceallianceforeducation.org. And those need to be received by noon on the day of meetings. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to add a new item to the agenda, which would be a report on the status of school closure, remote learning, and LPS's coronavirus response. Could I get that motion, please?
So moved.
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I'd like to note member Silverio is present, and I think we're still awaiting the other two members. So this was my error, and just basically want to give the superintendent the opportunity to brief us on any updates relative to coronavirus response and issues, and I want to give board members the opportunity to ask any questions. When the mayor joins us, I also want to give him an opportunity to provide an update relative to City of Lawrence's response. So with that, could I turn it over to you, Superintendent?
Sure, thank you. So I want to share with you an update that we're going to be sending with families later this week. First, I want to go through the timeline of the past 3 weeks. As you all know, we started our closure on March the 16th, and a few developments have happened since. The first thing we did, and the most immediate thing that we did, we prioritized ensuring that our students had access to meals. And so we immediately launched grab and go breakfast and lunch from 11 to 1 at different sites, the Arlington, Gilmet, Frost, Partham, the campus, and then we partner with the Salvation Army as well. The first 2 weeks of the closure, we launched extensive resources that we posted on our website and shared with our educators, administrators, and families. The week of the 23rd, 2 weeks into the closure, we distributed technology to families who wanted a device for free and for them to keep, and issued nearly 9,000 devices. I'll give you the breakdown of that in a moment, to about 10,000 families. And that, of course, was a great thank you to the mayor who made this possible and made the commitment right away when we came up with this idea. The following week, school leaders and school-based teams embarked on designing remote learning plans guided by DESE. And while we all know that this is not what's going to replicate the school day, we encourage, the priority was to encourage engagement and connection with students and families. I want to share with you a few highlights of my one-to-one conversations with school leaders to give you a sense of how things are going in now our third week of closure. First, I bucket these in the reports about kids, families, and lastly about staff. And I quote, this is about our students. Our high schoolers are responding to the outreach, and it has been awesome. Our high schoolers are anxious about getting a diploma and about prom. They're worried about graduation. They're craving the structure and the routines. For the kids that don't like school, this is great. They're working at their own pace. They don't have to get up early. This is a nice challenge for them. It's been challenging connecting with kids whose phone numbers are not working. There's a lot of disconnected phone numbers, and we're trying to reach our kids through any means. An example that was given to me is that in a middle school where there are several kids that they haven't been able to reach, they're now using the strategy of connecting with their classmates and seeing if by chance the classmates have logged on to video games, if they're texting with each other, if they've seen them in the neighborhood. So those are the many ways that our staff members are connecting and trying to engage with our students. About families, principals report, quote, the families through LPS, families were a bit confused about LPS providing connectivity, Wi-Fi. We are explaining to them that we're not an internet provider, but we're helping them with the process. Some families were on hold for over 3 hours to get Comcast to offer connectivity. Once they waited and we were able to help them, it took 3 to 4 days to get them connected. The volume is really big. Kids are using their phones as hotspots. T-Mobile has increased the use of data until the end of the year so they can connect to their devices. We're sending short videos to families via text, Zoom, email, any technology possible. We're bringing food to families who have parent member who is very ill with the virus and unable to connect and feed their students. I feel proud of our kids, parents, and staff members. We're really interfacing with families in a more intimate way. This is good for us. Families that are struggling is because they have lost their jobs. One dad is scared to leave the house, has housing insecurity and food insecurity because he just lost his job, is undocumented, and is fearful that he can also get sick. Comcast has been difficult, and we are creating all kinds of cheat sheets and videos and phone calls to support our families. Kids are being very savvy about borrowing data. And this example was, I think kids are learning how to find hotspots and borrow someone else's data, maybe a neighbor's or something like that. So again, I'm quoting verbatim the information that school leaders have shared about staff. Quote, I'm really proud of LPS teacher giving 110% to this. The special education team has gone above and beyond in their paras connecting with their students. I'm over the top impressed by teachers and their commitment. They're the most amazing teachers and are going above and beyond for our kids. We're doing phone calls, text, email, and social distancing visitings, and everyone is giving a heroic effort. My clerk has been unbelievable. She transferred the main line to her cell phone, and I'm so proud of her. And this last story is a personal funny story from one of the school leaders. And to all of these calls that I've done one-to-one, I've asked them, give me the highlights of the remote learning plan and how you all are doing, and tell me how we can continue to help. So one school leader said, I said, so how are you doing homeschooling your own children? She says, oh, my daughter has figured out that when I'm working, she can ask me for anything, any treat, any candy. Just recently, I gave her 5 hours of recess. So of course, our school leaders are also parents, and they also are challenged by this being at home, working full time, tending to their own family and tending to themselves. So again, I think the challenges that I've shared with you are not, they're no surprise to us. We know that this is new territory for all of us. We know that we're going to continue to highlight some of the inequities that we have in our district. Our job now is to sort of keep collecting that data, speak to the folks who are on the ground, our staff members, and continue to troubleshoot as things arise. As you heard, the biggest challenge right now continues to be connectivity. We're working to see if we can do some bulk purchasing of hotspots. We are going to be checking in with different providers, and I'm in touch with other area superintendents on how to solve this issue of connectivity. But on the good news is that really people are feeling more connected to their community, their students and their families, and they're really working really hard to ensure that that remains throughout the closure. So I'll take any questions, comments, or reactions that you have.
Great, thank you, Superintendent, for the detailed report there, and we'll move to questions. I just want to mention two pieces. First, we are broadcasting live, streaming on Facebook. Second, what I will do in terms of questions is I will call on everybody. It's fine. If you don't have questions, you can just say that no questions at this time. I'll work in alphabetical order. And then on the next agenda item or the next set of questions, I'll go in reverse alphabetical. So, and I'll go last. Jess Anders, any questions on this superintendent's update on coronavirus response?
Yeah, thank you. That was a great update. I guess I just have a question. I want to just dig a little deeper into the issue of connectivity, because I think we've talked about the fact that getting the computers to students was the first step, which was awesome. And now there's, as you mentioned, these challenges in getting families connected in some cases. So I guess I just want to get some clarification from your remarks. Is that being handled on a school by school basis? Or do we have like a district-wide plan around reaching out to families to see if they need support in getting connected and learning how to navigate Zoom and Google Classroom and other applications that they need? And is there a way that community organizations could be helpful in that? I know that there's been some discussion on the nonprofit coordinating committee that has been meeting to just sort of handle general response and support general response at the city level, that maybe some of the youth serving organizations could be helpful. And so I'm just wondering what the overall plan is from LPS around that.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the first week of our students and families sort of testing out their devices. And so those data points are coming straight from the schools. And the first layer is reaching those students and families that we haven't been able to reach. Once we've reached them is learning, do you have connectivity or not? The first thing that we ask our school leaders is to support families with the Comcast opportunity. That's the easiest and quickest one for them. And as you've heard from some of the school leaders, it's taking quite a bit of time to do that. 3 hours on hold. The other challenge has been, that I did not mention in some of these comments, is that once they are on hold for that long and they're being asked personal questions, our families shy away from giving that personal information. And so we move on to the next opportunity, which is trying to understand when they have their cell phones, is there a way to then call their cell phone plan to increase their data so they can use that device to then be a hotspot to connect their device? That's the other quickest way of doing it. This third one would be central, working on getting what I call a deal with a provider where we can purchase hotspots and then deploy it to those families that in the next week still are unable to connect via Comcast or via their own personal cell phone data plan. So we're still going to need a few more days, perhaps another week, to get the scope of how many families haven't been able to access the Comcast offer and their own data plan to then be able to deploy the additional hotspots. And yes, we would love support from any of our partners who has access to hotspots, who has a connection with a provider who can understand the scale of our district. We're talking about maybe purchasing 500, maybe more hotspots. I don't know yet.
Okay. And then just in terms of support for, like, let's say, okay, we've got the hardware, then let's say we get people connected or most people connected. How are we, like, but let's say someone has no clue what Zoom is, right?
Yes.
Or
yes.
like, how can we help families kind of navigate that aspect of it?
This is specific to each level. So for example, when I spoke to the early learning center principals, they are more using platforms that families are better acquainted with. So WhatsApp, Facebook as another example, texting, short videos on FaceTime, and it's also more appropriate for them. In the middle, in the high school, the teachers have done workshops. As an example, one principal told me today that 60 kids showed up to a Zoom workshop so they could better understand how to navigate that. So they're hosting their mini workshops inside. It's more geared to the student at the middle and high school. And then, of course, the other platforms for the elementary and younger grades is also being both developmentally appropriate, and depending on the grade and who needs the outreach, we're going to be offering what we call workshops.
Okay, great. It would be great, like at the next meeting, can you just keep us posted on how that's all
Sure.
going and what the ongoing challenges are? So yes, thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Jess. Noemi, questions?
I don't have any question at this point, but I do want to say that, we really appreciate the work that the school district have been doing with the students. We see it on the early college side, and it has been a tremendous effort on the part of the schools to get quickly the tools that that the students needed in order for them to continue their classes. So I just want to shout out to all of you that have been doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noemi. Pat Mariano, questions?
Yes, just to echo what Naomi said, I'd like to commend the teachers and the whole school department for the effort to do the outreach to the families. I mean, this is an unbelievable task, and I think, something we've never had experienced before. So I think, to do what you've done so far is really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
My question is about Comcast. That's really a shame, to offer, connectivity to families and then have people sit on the phone for 3 hours. I don't know how this works with the city, but has the mayor tried to facilitate any of that where, sometimes the contract between Verizon and Comcast comes up and it goes before the city for approval? The mayor might have some pull as far as that, maybe facilitating an easier path for the families.
Yeah, happy to check in with me. I'm getting a message from one of my colleagues that T-Mobile is 30 days out for hotspots right now, because as you can imagine, it's not just us who is requesting
Right.
the additional connectivity. It's why the wait is so long. It's why it's taking an enormous amount of time. But yeah, I'm happy to check in with him.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Julia Silverio, any questions?
No, more of a comment. John, again, I'd like to echo the same sentiments of my colleagues in this issue and commend the LPS family for the hard work that they've done in reaching out and connecting the students and their families. I anticipate that connectivity will become a bigger issue, a bigger challenge in the coming days due to the high demand for use that we're having not only in our community but throughout. But I also want to say that while this has been a big challenge, I think it will probably turn into a great opportunity for the LPS family to connect with the families and students in the future, which has always been a challenge for us. So keep up the good work, and I'm sure that this is not going to stop. And I'm sure that the providers such as Comcast, T-Mobile, and all of them are being faced with a lot of challenges as well because of this high demand from every community.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julia. Joseph Trinidad, any questions?
No questions at the moment, but I just wanted to say thank you to you, Ms. Superintendent, Ms. Paris, and to all LPS officials who have been working so hard to make this this process kind of seamless. I know that there's a lot of uncertainty still for seniors and stuff like that, and hopefully those questions could be answered pretty soon. But as of right now, I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. You have really made it easy with the by providing technology and by providing all these gadgets. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Superintendent, have a couple of questions. So I'm wondering, sort of, I don't know if tracking is the right word, but sort of how we are monitoring like the students who seem off the radar right now. Like we know maybe they don't have a Chromebook or whatever, despite best efforts. And not that they're necessarily calling saying we're having trouble with connectivity, but that like they're not calling, we're not hearing from them. And they're sort of off. So they're sort of off our, we don't have any direct contact with them. I'm wondering sort of what we're doing in terms of just like, what are we doing to try and figure out who those students are, as almost like to the individual?
Yep.
And I asked that question knowing like that is not something you can just snap your fingers and make happen, but I'm wondering sort of like what's the strategy around that?
Yeah, actually, every school leader knows which kid and family they haven't connected with. So the latest example I gave you was the middle school principal who has 5 kids, missing, they're not missing, but she hasn't been able to connect. And her latest strategy was the video game strategy, because when she called the other kids in that particular classroom for one kid, they said, oh, I think I saw him, playing blah, blah, blah the other day. And so they're now sort of using their peers to say, when you reconnect with them, please, 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 right? So that's one strategy. We would normally do home visits, as you know, when we haven't connected with a family in a few days, and that's not possible right now. So school leaders and staff are getting incredibly creative to try to figure out, and you can imagine they've already gone through the roster of emergency numbers, next of kin numbers, and a few other stories. We have families who are transitioning right now from homes for many reasons, phones that have gotten disconnected for many reasons. And so I have appealed to the school leaders and their staff to help us figure out what's the next step to connect with the 3, the 4, the 5 kids. We're not talking hundreds of kids, but each school has at least a handful of kids they have been unable to connect with in 3 weeks, which we don't feel good about, but we're going to perseverate. I can come back to you to see what other innovative ways folks are thinking about trying to reach to those families we haven't reached yet.
Yeah. And so clearly there is this strategy where like, we know who these kids are.
They know who they are. They know exactly who they are. And in many cases, what the school leaders have reported is that in some cases, it's the same students who struggled with attendance. It's the same students who moved from one home to the next. So there's some familiarity. And of course, this exacerbates the whole experience for them. So they're not surprised. But there are some surprising families. They're like, this is weird. We haven't connected with so-and-so. But they know exactly who they are.
Great. Second question would be more to now that we've got the MOU in place with the teachers and sort of established work rules. I know that's just now going up to speed, but will we have some version of sort of taking attendance when we've got Zoom classrooms with, that teachers are going out and doing whatever it is, like a Zoom classroom of, some other app to meet, but will we monitor sort of which kids are present in those classrooms and which kids are turning in work? I'm less concerned with the grades aspect of this, but so much as just trying to keep our kids on the radar, because we can have a kid connected and a kid who's got got the Chromebook and is connected, but there are many reasons, as you've mentioned, whatever's going on in a house, the different stresses in this time that kid might be connected on a Tuesday and then disappear for a week. And are we going to be able to monitor that, at the teacher and school level?
Yes. So an example of that was also given to me today. One of the principals reported that out of 165 kids, 157 were connected, but the other kids who were connected were not producing work. So there's 2 layers to this. Yep. Kids who are actually connected but not doing any work.
Yep.
and then kids who are not connected. So the direction that we've taken and guidance we gave staff members is like document every single effort and be extremely tenacious about your outreach to families. Exhaust every single outlet possible. So the answer is yes, they are keeping track of when they connect with the students, what kind of connection they had, and once they've connected, what kind of work they're producing.
Great. I'm really happy to hear that, and I appreciate all those efforts by LPS on that front, and that's great to hear. I guess lastly, I will just say this was my mistake on the agenda, and I appreciate everybody adding it to the agenda, but we will just now have a running first item on the agenda for the foreseeable future of getting an update on LPS's coronavirus response. When the mayor joins, I want to also give him a chance to update us on the city response and any pertinent issues there. So I will now turn it over to the superintendent for her report. I know we've got one item on the agenda under that, as well as any other parts she wishes to mention in that report. Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you. So tonight we're going to share with you our variance policy, and Assistant Superintendent Denise Snyder will be sharing that presentation. Joining us also is our legal counsel, Angela Smagula, in case you guys have additional questions about this proposed variance policy. So I think Dave is going to share the screen right now so that you all can see the PowerPoint.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. I'm going to jump in here and explain a little bit. I know that we're very focused on things that are happening in this particular time period, but we're also trying to keep planning for ongoing business of the district, and that includes getting ready to open up the application season for the variances that families apply for. So tonight I'm actually presenting on a request to amend our variance policy. So it's an amendment to a particular piece of the policy and not the entire policy itself. The amendment is small, but it's a meaningful change to provide better equity, we believe, for students who are attending school on a variance. So with that, I think if we can go to exactly what is a variance, for us, it's a request that seeks permission to attend a school other than the one to which a student should be enrolled under the LPS assignment policy. So as a reminder, the LPS school assignment policy is centered on neighborhood schools. You live near one school, that's the school you go to. And we believe that our district delivers instructional services to meet diverse learning needs of all of our students in all of our neighborhoods. But we recognize that there are some instances when students can really benefit from attending a school other than their neighborhood one. And so our variance policy has consistently provided an orderly and thoughtful process, we believe, for the variances to our assignment policy. So if we can move to the next slide, what I really want to do is call your attention to the requests that we're seeking under Rule 5 of the rules for enrollment on a variance. And with that, I should speak a little bit about how we got here. So the current policy was written in 2016, and it represented for us a major shift from school-based decision-making around variances and applications to a centralized process. So this was a moment in time when we recognized that there could be a lot of subjectivity in a school-based decision-making process, and we centralized the process at that point. At that time, there were concerns about students on variances potentially adding to the many, many responsibilities of the schools who were accepting these students. So therefore, the burden to remain on a variance was set at a pretty high threshold. And so as you can see here, the two thresholds for maintaining enrollment are really currently that a student's attendance in classes falls below 97% due to absence, tardiness, or dismissal. So for that could be one reason why a school wants to revoke a variance. The other would be that a student is suspended for any disciplinary action. So those are the two reasons that we might say a school has the right to revoke a variance with the student who's enrolled there if either of these things happen. However, in consultation with our attorney, we were recommending changes to the rule so that we can better align, I think, our goals for all students with regards to discipline. So we believe that while students enrolled on variances should not add to the load schools carry, we should note that students should not be held to a substantially different set of expectations from the other students in the school in order to remain in that school. So to that end, we've aligned the expectations for attendance with the state's definition of chronic absenteeism. So in this first instance, we've said rather than their attendance falling below 97%, that instead it could be a reason to revoke if their attendance falls below what we consider what becomes chronic absenteeism, right? So chronic absenteeism is defined of at least missing 10% of the days enrolled. And that seemed a much fairer threshold for consideration. And then secondly, when we talk about discipline, that a student receives, if a student receives out of school suspension for a total of 5 or more cumulative days, instead of being suspended for any disciplinary action for any amount of time. So we looked at something, some criteria that would set the bar at something that was more realistic, more in line with the types of behaviors that we expect from all students in all of our schools, and believe that the changes really do address the inequities and better support our students just simply by minimizing the amount of transitions that they have to make. And so if we go to the last slide, I just want to address that the reason, again, that we're bringing this to you at this time is because the variance season will soon be upon us. Typically, we accept requests for a variance starting at the beginning of May, and students or families are allowed to apply through the last day of school. And we do this so that we can then look at our promotion lists and understand our capacity. So we know how many seats are available in schools, because if a family meets or a student meets the criteria for the variance and there's room in the school, we will accept the variance. But we want to be able to tell families and schools by July 1st so that they can have the time in the summer to plan around school readiness for both the transition or the ability to stay over the summer. So I should make a note that the exception to that is that obviously our new to Lawrence Public Schools families and those who relocate over the summer have an opportunity to apply for a variance on a rolling basis. But again, the bulk of the reason why we're bringing this tonight is because we really want to have this ready to go in May, so families understand specifically the criteria of a variance and what it means for them, and to notify the schools of the change. So I'm going to stop there, and I can take your questions, as well as Angela is on the line as well.
Great. Thank you, Denise. I'm going to go in reverse order from our first agenda item question. So Joseph Trinidad, any questions you want to ask on the variance policy?
No questions at this moment.
Great. Julio Silverio?
Just a quick question. Do we have numbers or percentages as to how many families request variances during the year?
Oh, thank you, Julia. Actually, I can get that for you. I didn't stop to look, but it's not a big percentage. I think last year it was less than 100 families, I think, but I'm happy to come back to you with that.
And do we allocate a number of spots in different schools for this? for the
We
variance?
we don't allocate. What we do is it's starting in May, we ask all of our schools to work with us on promotion lists, and that tells us how many seats are available in those schools after neighborhood students fill those seats. And at that point, if they meet one of the 3 criteria and there's room, we will accept the variance.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Julia. Pat Mariano, questions?
Yes, Denise, at the time that the variance is requested, and if there's no space in that school, are these families that requested variances put on a waiting list should space become available? How does,
So we don't do a wait list. We have to, turn down the variance at that time. We do tell them that they can try again for the following year. But we're kind of cautious that once school is begun, we continue to enroll families all throughout the year. So again, it's always that tension between, having someone from outside the neighborhood take a seat because they've asked for it earlier, or giving it to someone who lives in the neighborhood. So it's a tension and a back and forth, but we don't keep a wait list.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Noemi Custodia Laura?
So my only question is, when you were talking about the variance and going from the 18% to the 10%, I believe?
Well, yeah, so it used to be the threshold if you missed anything, if your attendance slipped below 97%, and instead we're looking at it as in line with chronic absenteeism, right? This is not a real concern unless you get close to the definition of chronic absenteeism, then it becomes a burden.
Okay, so this one is in alignment to the work, that was gonna be my question. This is in alignment with the work that we previously did about the absenteeism, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Noemi. Jess Anders?
I don't have any questions. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Thanks, Denise.
Sure.
I just have a process question for you, Denise. Do we need to wait a meeting to vote on this, or are we good to vote tonight?
So I'm going to actually flip that over to Angela if, well, I'll start it, but she can back me up. We had a conversation about that. And this was a little while back, but because of receiver status, we don't always have to hold the line on voting one meeting later. Angela, do you remember that conversation, and do you want to jump in there? I know it was, you're on mute. You're on mute. There you go.
Hi, everybody. So you guys don't actually have a specific policy right now in the district that speaks to how you go about amending school policies. So you have a lot of flexibility in there. You could vote tonight, or you could table it and vote at the next meeting, but seeing that there's not a lot of questions or concerns about the changes that have been made, you are well within your right to vote on it tonight if you want.
Thank you. Appreciate that. LAE Council has advised us in the past that we are fine to vote on matters on the same night under the receivership law and under our bylaws. I do know the reason, Denise, why I asked you specifically, and I think what Angela has spoken to is at least once in the past, we were concerned about potential conflict relative to a specific school policy and some other governing laws or regs. It sounds like that doesn't apply in this situation. So at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the amendment to the variance policy as presented to the board at this meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
I have the motion by Julia Silverio, second by Patricia Mariano. I would ask, because we're doing this meeting remotely, Joan, could you call the roll on this vote? And yes will be a vote in support of amending the policy. No would be a vote against the amendment.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute right away. Okay, Ms. Silverio,
Yes.
Ms. Andors,
Yes.
Ms. Mariano,
Yes.
Ms. Custodio Laura,
Can you unmute, Noemi?
Yes.
Thanks.
and Chair Conley.
Yes.
And there are two absent, Dr. Rodriguez and Mayor Rivera, and I will mark them absent.
And we have 5 votes in the affirmative. Joan, is that correct?
Actually had 6, but now hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes.
Great. The motion carries. The amendment is approved by a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Denise and team. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, Superintendent, any other pieces on your report that you want to address right now? Or
Not at this time.
great, thanks, Superintendent. So we'll move to report of the chair. I want to begin with an earned autonomy framework presentation. As I mentioned at our special meeting last week, earned autonomy remains on schedule. And I think, we are still on schedule to vote in June. Tonight, CPRL will present on their work to date. Cover basically what they've done in terms of extensive outreach, how they've developed their work from there, take your questions, and then in May, we'll actually look at a draft framework, give feedback, and hopefully move toward a vote in June. But at this time, I want to turn it over to Maddie Sims from CPRL, who has a presentation for us, and we'll take questions as well.
Great. Thank you, John. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for inviting CPRL here this evening to give a brief update on our work. So if you turn to slide 2 of the presentation, you'll see a brief agenda. I'll start by providing a quick update on our stakeholder engagement process to date and share some of our key takeaways from that process. Next, I'll turn and walk you through our theory of action. And finally, I will briefly recap our next steps. So now turning to slide 4, this provides a overview of the range of stakeholders that we had the opportunity to connect with. And with many thanks to the LPS leadership team and John and others for helping us get connected with a really wide range of individuals who are either working in Lawrence or have expertise working with various student groups, such as English language learners or students with disabilities, who are really key priorities for the Lawrence district looking forward. So you'll see on the slide that we've had extensive discussions with the central office leadership team, with principals, with teachers and staff, with parents and guardians, with representatives from local nonprofit organizations, the business community, as well as several DESE offices. And we were really incredibly fortunate on this stakeholder process that we were in Lawrence both during February and early March, right before social distancing became necessary. And so we had the opportunity to conduct a lot of in-person conversations, including in-person focus groups with some of our key stakeholder groups. And we've also had the opportunity to continue conversations during March via phone or Zoom. So our project luckily has really not been impacted too much by the surrounding events. So turning to slide 5, this is a quick overview of the questions that we sought to answer through our stakeholder engagement process. So you see, first, what does success look like at the school level? Second, what actions must schools take to support all Lawrence students, including high-need students? Third, what categories of support are most important for each group of stakeholder? And finally, what are the sources of frustration and day-to-day challenges currently being faced by individuals on the ground in Lawrence? And the answers to all 4 of these questions are really what form the key building blocks of the theory of action, which I'll talk about a little bit later, as well as the overall framework. Now, turning to slide 6, this next set of slides that you'll see is organized around 4 really important stakeholder groups. First, students, next we'll turn to teachers and staff, then we'll turn to parents, and finally we'll turn to principals. And these slides really try to summarize some of the key takeaways from our conversations, and then also provide some illustrative quotes that we heard during our conversations and really wanted to share back with all of you. So I won't read everything on these slides, but I'll try to highlight sort of a quick couple points on each. So starting with students, 2 themes that really stood out to us were, 1, the need for opportunities to build college and career readiness. And second, the need for schools to embrace cultural responsiveness across the board. And what I mean by this is it's sort of not enough for a school or leader to say that that's being prioritized, but really there's a need for it to be coming through in the curriculum, in the events that the school is putting on, and also in the way in which teachers and staff interact with their students. On the next slide, slide 7, you'll see a couple quotes that illustrate, sort of provide a bit of color about what it means to really build college and career readiness, and what it means for teachers and staff and principals to promote engagement among students. And so one of the things that really stood out for us was there was a ton of excitement around the early college program, and really some of those opportunities for students to gain exposure to careers that they might not otherwise know exist. And so the way this sort of impacts our framework is that we're really thinking about building indicators that not only look at, for example, the number of students that graduate, but also look at whether students feel that there are adults in the building who they're able to talk to about college and careers. Are there opportunities for students to participate in programs such as the early college program or other vocational programs that really give them the skills that they'll need to succeed, whether that next step is directly to a career or to a college or other community college program. So turning to slide 8, here is a summary of some of the learnings that we took away from teachers and staff. And 2 ideas I want to highlight here are, first, professional development programs, specifically the need to ensure that PD programming is really responsive to teachers on the ground needs. And second, opportunities for teachers to collaborate with colleagues. And we heard about this both from general ed teachers, as well as the particular need for special education teachers to have that opportunity to collaborate to ensure that all students, regardless of their need level, have a really fair chance to succeed in the classroom. And on slide 9, you'll see really that it was really actually exciting for us, because we heard about so much of the great work taking place and the excitement that teachers have for those opportunities to collaborate. And I think that when the superintendent was earlier talking about how teachers and staff are really giving 110%, in the current situation, I think what we've been hearing as well is this incredible excitement around the degree to which teachers and staff really care about doing right by their students. At the same time, what we're also hearing is a need for really additional support, and this idea that students are arriving at school with so many different needs, whether that be unresolved trauma, whether that be other stresses that they're bringing with them. And we heard a lot from teachers about, in order to be successful, there needs to be additional supports, whether that's the correct ratio of guidance counselors to students, whether that is the existence of, for high needs students, the existence of special education teachers that are trained to collaborate and design lesson plans accordingly. And again, these are all sort of, did I hear a question? Okay. Feel free to jump in at any time, and I'll pause sort of in a couple slides to give people a chance. I think that one of the things I just wanted to say is that all of these learnings are being sort of synthesized on our end, and then will be coming through in our theory of action and in our indicators. So here on slide 10, we're moving on to parent and guardian needs. What really stood out here to us is the amazing desire among so many parents to be meaningfully involved in their students' learning. We heard really incredibly heartwarming stories from parents about the fact that before they immigrated here, they could have never even dreamed that their child would be able to attend a school where their teachers cared so much about every student. Now, at the same time, we heard the hard truth that a lot of parents are working multiple jobs and that they don't always feel empowered to partner with their schools. That could either be because of a language barrier or because they don't have the skills needed to assist with homework in the way that they want to. And on the next slide, you'll see sort of one or two on slide 11, really sort of one or two quotes that talk about the role of school-parent partnerships in creating high expectations, which as you all know, sort of research shows is so important for building a successful school community. And then also the need for schools and the district to be really creative and flexible when designing programming. And what they mean by that is sort of, you can see that in the sort of quote on the bottom left, that there is this tension where you have parents that want to be helping, but also sort of cookie cutter programming is not going to be what enables those parents to get involved. And so we've heard about a lot of schools taking, really making real strides in this area. And it's something that when it comes time to building indicators in our framework, we want to ensure that we're measuring not just the number of parent events, for example, but also going directly to parents and asking, are the events accessible for you? Were the events delivered in the right language? Were they scheduled at a time where you were able to attend given all your other obligations? And I think that's really the difference between sort of a check the box exercise versus really meaningfully asking whether schools are engaging with parents in a way that will promote student learning. And then finally, turning to slide 12, you'll see the last sort of set of stakeholders we focused on for this presentation, although we talked to sort of a lot of other groups in this, and I'm certainly happy to sort of provide any additional detail later on. But from principals, we heard a couple themes. One, we heard a lot about the need for transparent communication around district level strategy so that they can design school level plans that are aligned to district goals and initiatives. And now we did hear from a lot of principals that they are excited about the communication that they've been receiving, particularly under Superintendent Paris, and that they're excited for this to continue going forward. On the second point, and I apologize if you hear some background noise, actually I'm in Manhattan, and very nicely at 7 p.m. there are cheers going on for healthcare workers that are working, and it's pretty loud in here, so I apologize if you hear any bit of background noise, but it's quite a nice part of my evening routine these days to hear sort of the city coming together for that. On the second point is around data and principals really wanting data that is diagnostic, and by diagnostic I mean principals want numbers and information that they can make decisions around in order to better help their students. And I think there's been some concern that information hasn't always been diagnostic in nature. This is something we hear from all schools, and it's certainly our hope that the framework that we are working with Lawrence to build will be a huge step to address that concern. And then finally, flipping to slide 13, and I will pause after this to see if there's any questions. You see sort of some quotes about emphasizing, again, communication, and then also listening to student voices. And I think that that's something we heard from a lot of principals about wanting the opportunity, particularly at the high school level, and then also for the younger grades as well, that they know that students have concerns and needs that aren't always being filtered up to school leaders or district leaders. And so I think that's one of the things that's really exciting about the framework we're putting together is we contemplate using direct student surveys as well as parent surveys to hopefully capture some of that information that might not otherwise make it up to the people who are actually making decisions. So I'll pause here. I know that was a lot of information, and I want to just check if anyone has any questions on any of the slides thus far, or if any sort of additional information about our stakeholder engagement process would be helpful. And John, it's up to you if it's preferable, given the video format, for me to sort of tick through the rest of the slides before we open it up for questions, really whatever you prefer.
Well, I think this is a good moment to pause and see if anyone has questions. And again, Maddie has additional slides and there'll be another opportunity for questions, but why don't I just ask at this moment, why don't you, if you can hold your hand up if you want to ask questions right now, and I will call on you. Okay, looks like you should keep going, Maddie.
Great. And there'll be another opportunity at the end if anyone, anything pops into your mind. So moving on to slide 14, I'm excited to share with you all a bit about our theory of action. So I, along with the rest of my team, have been working to synthesize all the stakeholder learnings that I just shared with you, along with best practices across the performance management space, to really put together a coherent theory of action. So what is a theory of action? A theory of action is a statement that articulates a working hypothesis about how specific school level actions will lead to school level success. So if you see on slide 15, you can see a quick chart that shows how the theory of action forms the building block of the entire framework. And so you'll see that after you have a theory of action put together, you can then work to build a framework that will equip the district with indicators that reveal the degree to which each school is both carrying out the actions needed to support all students on the one hand, and then also producing desired student outcomes on the other. Once you have those indicators selected, and again, each of the indicators are not pulled out of thin air, the indicators are instead directly tied to the what it is that the Lawrence community cares about. Once you have those indicators in place, you then are able to create a dashboard, which is really a snapshot that will allow the district to understand how each school is performing across a range of indicators. And not only will the dashboard sort of give a snapshot of current performance, but it will also enable comparison against prior performance, the rest of the district, and then enable decisions to be made about supports, about autonomy, and also about the allocation of resources. And now flipping to slide 16, you will see our draft theory of action. And I'll try to, I know it's a lot of information on one slide, I'll try to voice over some of the key items here. So reading from sort of the top, you can see the theory of action is built as, if the leadership, staff, and community at each Lawrence district school collaborate to, and then the 4 boxes really tick you through the 4 categories that we have heard from folks are really important. First, it's operations. Second, it's academic experience. Third, it's school environment. And fourth, it's family and community engagement. So if schools get those 4 categories right, then all students, including high need students, will do 4 things. And it's a process. Students will engage, students will grow, students will achieve, and students will ultimately be prepared for success. As a result of all of this, students will succeed in college and/or employment and ultimately become engaged members of their community. And the reason that I sort of show you this whole theory of action now is because the entire framework is ultimately built off of this draft. And so each of the different categories, both the action categories, which appear in the boxes on the top, as well as the outcome categories, which appear in the box at the bottom, are then tied to specific indicators that attempt to both qualitatively and quantitatively assess each of these factors. And I'll chime in with one other point. We're excited about this draft for 2 reasons. One is that it really does incorporate all of the learnings that I sort of just walked you through in the prior slides. And I think when we do this type of work, we get different levels of engagement from the district, from schools, from community members. And I think we are just really appreciative of the level of engagement we've had across the board in Lawrence. And especially, we had the opportunity to workshop this draft with Superintendent Paris and the rest of the district leadership team. And we had the opportunity to receive feedback from them on an earlier draft and incorporate their comments. And so I think that with the various iterations, we are could not be more excited about where the draft is and the opportunity to build off of this going forward. And so moving on to the last slide, you can go one more to slide 18. This is just sort of a recap of the timeline. This is a similar presentation, or excuse me, a similar slide that you saw when I was in Lawrence, I guess a couple months ago, in terms of where we are against the timeline. Luckily, the blue color, which symbolizes where we are, has moved a couple blocks forward. So we are now building off of the theory of action, and we are identifying guiding principles. We're identifying the metrics and the data collection tools that will be used for all of that. And with that, I think I will pause and really just thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share an update with all of you, especially during this uncertain time. And I'm happy to provide any additional information or answer any questions that you all may have.
Great, thank you, Maddie. So gonna again work in alphabetical order here. Jess Anders, any questions?
Actually, not so much a question as a comment. This was a great presentation and seems like a very thorough process that you guys went through, and I'm just really glad to see family and community engagement as one of the, I guess the way I see it, sort of like one of the key inputs to getting the outcomes that we want to see. So it looks like a great job. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Noemi Custodia-Laura?
Yeah, I don't have any comments right now. So I echo what Jess said, that, you know, it seems that things are moving in the right direction, and that's a great thing.
Great. Thank you. I'm calling everybody's full names because we're remote, just so we're abundantly clear in the minutes and for anybody watching. Pat Mariano?
Patricia Mariano.
Patricia Mariano. Thank you, Miss Mariano.
You're quite welcome. I was very impressed with the presentation, Maddie. You did a thorough job. And what I found very interesting when you described your theory of action and the indicators, they seem to intersect with our Student Opportunity Act goals, which I think is a nice fit with what the direction the district is going in. So I really appreciate the work that you and your group have done. I'm very happy with it at this time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Julia Silverio?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Joseph Trinidad?
I have no questions, but I wanted to say thank you for this amazing presentation. As a student, all my concerns, I think, are expressed and worked out in the thing as a whole. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Great. Maddie, I just wanted to say excellent presentation. Really appreciate the thoroughness and the great work to date. I also just want to state for the board and just broader context, the amount of work that CPRL did in February and March right up until the stay-at-home order was amazing. Like, they were working what had to be really around the clock, and just at every time that we checked in, and there were regular check-ins with the district, with the Joint Steering Committee, they were ahead of schedule, and it's what puts us in the position to be able to hopefully move this to fruition in June. So I just want to commend your great work to date, and thank you for it, and your team. And two, I want to echo Jess Anders' comments. I'm thrilled that family and community engagement landed in the top 4 there. I think that shows that the work that you did in engaging stakeholders was very real. And say at no point did I ever have conversations where I said, this is what's got to be there or here or there. Like, this is an organic product, and I'm thrilled with the way it aligns at this point. Last piece, if I could just get you to talk about it for a second, but something I just want to really hammer home. I think the board has a great grasp of where we're at based on your presentation, but you did reference it briefly. One of the ways that we fulfill these indicators and will be able to create these dashboards for each school on a regular basis you mentioned was through surveys. I was wondering if you could talk about maybe any other models you've worked on in other districts, but I presume, given what I'm looking at here, ways that we, would survey students, families, and teachers on a regular, annual basis. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we have, in terms of sort of other work that we've done for a similar project, we've worked with a couple school districts, including the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. We've worked with a lot of charter organizations. We've also worked with philanthropic organizations that are sort of ed aligned, that are looking to measure effectiveness amongst their portfolio. And so in all of these cases, survey data does become incredibly valuable because it's a way to capture the direct voices of stakeholders whose voices wouldn't otherwise be directly captured. So you can sort of, if you think about it, if you're trying to measure student preparedness, if you're only looking at quantitative data like test scores or test growth, you're kind of trying to indirectly measure underlying factors that you might really care about. So in terms of the types of surveys that we would be administering, we would be covering, I think there's a lot of really strong surveys out there, and this would be an example where we are not going to be reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch. Rather, we're going to be aiming to pull the types of categories that are already in use by other districts, and that would be things like school climate, things like school safety, things like student engagement, so whether students are feeling challenged in their classes. And typically the way that works is we find that sort of the 1 to 5 Likert scale is a pretty widely used methodology. And so eventually what we'll be doing is handing over draft surveys for the district to use, as well as some guidance on sort of how to distribute these to hopefully increase participation rates. And then along with the surveys, we'll be relying on a couple additional tools. I think as I mentioned last time, we are going to be utilizing DESI data because that's really important data that it already appears in the school profile. So we'll be pulling DESI data, we'll be pulling a lot of administrative records. So this is sort of data that already lives either at the school level or at the district level, but might not currently be being utilized. So one thing we find when we work with districts is a lot of times when we ask, oh, do you collect information on sort of the ratio of guidance counselors to students? It's like, yeah, that data definitely exists, but right now we're not looking at it. So yeah, maybe once in a while people are saying, oh, we need to make a decision, but we're not looking at it on a sort of annual or regular basis. So one of the hopes is that this would sort of elevate some of the administrative data that already exists. And additionally, we're hoping to work with the district, and this is sort of a conversation that I think we're going to be having with the district soon, along with DESI, is how to expand the existing quality review process, which is really consists of in-school visits, and that's an opportunity for third-party experts to take a look at, in particular, the type of processes in place for continuous learning and the processes in place for the use of data and continuous improvement over time that really have been shown to predict future growth opportunities.
Great, Maddie, I really appreciate that. I do want to note we've been joined by Mayor Rivera, and I believe we've been joined by Ventura Rodriguez as well. Mayor Rivera, I don't know if you want to ask any questions on earned autonomy at this time.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Great. Ventura, are you there? Okay, I thought I said.
That's the mayor's number. That's
Gotcha.
not Ventura's number. That's
Okay, gotcha. Okay, great. So Maddie, thank you very much. We appreciate your time tonight. We'll look forward to the next step and hearing from you at our next meeting in May. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Mayor Rivera, do you want to give an update around coronavirus response in the city and any pertinent information you would want to share?
Yes, I do. I just I'm trying to go to a place where there's no ambient noise. That also means where my kids aren't. Sorry. I just want to give just a general overview of something that we sent out an email and a voicemail and text messages throughout the city, about the status of the virus in the city, and it's just very high level, dealing with the number of cases we have, 364 last night. 5 known fatalities, and that we're doing everything possible to kind of meet the demand of beds and all those things. In about half an hour, we'll probably put out another count because it's the number that I gave was from last night. In general, we continue to be in a state of emergency, federal, state level and local. And so I like to remind people of that all the time because it's not a normal state of affairs, even though we feel like it's a normal state of affairs. But we're trying to deal with, issues about the budget. The state budget is not as clear, what going forward is going to happen for the rest of this fiscal year, and not to mention the next fiscal year. I know we're doing a lot of conversations about the Student Opportunity Act, but I'm not really sure, and there's probably varying opinions on that, given the state of affairs, whether or not that money is going to materialize next year. And so we're just going to make sure that we all are prepared for that eventuality, as well as, the city finances aren't going to be what they used to be. Even if we come back full bore in September, but I'm not really sure that is going to be where we're going to be at. I wanted to just put this all kind of in perspective because we're all kind of marching in a direction as if, the state of affairs have been kind of, even though we're home and not at work, I just want people to understand that even when we come back, the impact that this has had on the economy and on the general workings that run local and state government has changed. And, even the idea that we would borrow money to go build our schools that we have in the pipeline, we're not really sure what the future for that holds. Sorry to come in the middle of this great meeting and positive conversation around engagement and understanding what people want to do in the direction they want the system to go in. But, this is, I just want to make sure you heard that from me now and not during budget time, and then no one feels surprised later on the road, because there is a change coming, and I'm just not sure what's going to be. That's my update for now, and just encourage people to stay home, wash their hands, distancing like everybody else is doing. We do have all types of contingency plans for the surge that's supposed to be coming. We have processes for people who need food. All those things are part of what we posted on the internet and emailed and voicemailed to people. And so we're going to make sure that our community doesn't get as much pain as possible. But, it's good that we are continuing to work and moving the agenda forward. Just want to make sure we're doing it with all eyes open. Thanks.
Thank you for the update, Mayor. Appreciate that, and appreciate your great work in this crisis. I don't know if you have questions for the mayor. If you want to just hold your hand up to the screen, I'm happy to call on anyone. Okay, no questions at this time. Okay, I'm going to continue with the agenda and move to turnaround plan update. That remains the same as the special meeting on March 31st. And I am going to circulate a possible motion now in the chat. And this is based off our discussion last time, and the chair would entertain a motion to delay conducting student and family outreach for the turnaround plan stakeholder engagement process until late August 2020 to be completed before the LAE's regular meeting in November 2020.
So moved.
Second,
The motion is made by Jess Anders and seconded by Patricia Mariano. A yes will be a vote to
Discussion?
accept the delay, and a no would be a vote against the delay.
Discussion?
Oh, sorry, Julia? Yep.
Is this a motion based on our last discussion at the last meeting, or is this something new?
No, this is based on the discussion at the last meeting at March 31st.
Where we agreed to reach out to the parents while they were home during
Sorry,
this time?
that's SOA, and that's coming, that's next on the agenda. This one was turnaround, and basically the same, a very similar issue.
Right, I think we briefly discussed and said that it might be a good opportunity. Okay, not a problem, thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Joan, could you call a roll on this?
Mayor Rivera,
Yes.
Julia Severio,
Yes,
Jess Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez is absent. Patricia Mariano,
yes.
Noemi Custodio Laura,
Yes.
and Chair John Conley.
Yes.
So 6 yeses and just 1 absent.
Thank you, Joan. The motion passes 6 yes, 0 no, 1 absent. And at this time, I will move on to Student Opportunity Act. And this was the issue we discussed last time, and had asked the district to conduct additional outreach to students and families. I want to talk a little bit about what's taken place between that March 31st meeting and now. The day after the March 31st meeting, LAE members were invited to a meeting with LPS central staff to further talk through possible options for conducting student and family outreach for Student Opportunity Act. 4 members took part in that meeting, and we had a good dialogue with the superintendent's team. The superintendent and I then had a meeting with DESE to discuss the same issue, and then I had an additional meeting with Jess Anders to discuss this, because I thought there were similarities with what was going on with Student Opportunity Act. Just want to be clear in referencing that, you know, to be in compliance with open meeting law, I can only talk to 2 of you at most about potential votes on this. I wanted to consult Jess because of her work with the turnaround plan and the similarities. I also had 2 conversations with the superintendent additionally on this. I think everyone, LPS central staff and the superintendent most especially, under these really tough circumstances, as well as LAE members and trying to give their guidance, and DESE, believe that we need to have additional outreach from students and families to present the best Student Opportunity Act application possible. I think everyone agrees on that. And I think that began with the really substantive conversation at the special meeting on March 31st. I also believe, based on all of these discussions, that the feeling is that remotely reaching families right now to conduct this survey is not feasible for the reasons that the superintendent stated before. Her staff and resources are focused on Chromebook deployment, getting families online, getting remote classrooms up and running, then identifying students and families who are falling through the cracks on that, and all other coronavirus-related responses. That's draining their resources. Additionally, I think the superintendent and LPS staff have made the point that they're having life and death conversations with families and students on a daily basis, including dealing with families who have gravely ill family members, and that the bandwidth and ability to conduct remote meetings with students and families to discuss this issue right now is not just infeasible, but could be taken in poor taste by, could be received that way by families. I think the second complicating issue is that expanding the survey, while possible, doesn't allow for the level of depth and conversation that we want to have to do this application correctly. I think that is where we are at this point in time. Now, one additional update. Since we met on the 31st, the state legislature has acted and said that the April 1st deadline is no longer the deadline. And if you'll recall, we discussed that at the last meeting. And they have enacted legislation that now makes the DESE commissioner the individual who will determine when the SOA application is due for each district. So it doesn't even have to, there's not a new deadline set at this time, and there is not necessarily going to be one uniform deadline set. There may be, but the legislation now says it's at the commissioner's discretion to set the deadline for each district in Massachusetts. Where all these discussions have taken us as to what I just want to put out to you for discussion tonight. I want to give the superintendent an opportunity to speak to this as well before we go to questions and discussion. But one of the ideas on the table here would be to petition DESE as a board to extend our deadline until the October LAE meeting, and to join the stakeholder engagement outreach that will take place via the turnaround plan beginning in late August with the SOA outreach, which could begin in late August, be completed hopefully through late August and September, and then presented to this board for approval at the October meeting and be sent to DESE then. So one, we'd like to discuss if that is a good plan in members' minds, and then and recognize within that, if we do decide it is, that what we will then do, I think, is vote to request that DESE set our deadline as shortly after the October LAE meeting. But with that framing, I hope that is I hope I conveyed this in a way that makes sense. Let me turn it over to the superintendent, just if there's any pieces she wants to add to what I just said. Superintendent, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, thank you. I think you've summarized that eloquently, so I appreciate it. I just wanted to underscore that we're ready and willing to engage our families and students as soon as we return from this closure. So it could be as early as this summer, June, July, August, to come back to you with additional feedback from those stakeholders.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent. I appreciate that. So I am going to go through members here for comments and questions on this. I'm going to work in reverse order again. Joseph Trinidad, any questions or comments relative to delaying the SOA application and having the outreach process run in tandem with the turnaround outreach?
No comments or questions at this moment.
Great, thank you, Joseph. Julia Silverio?
I don't think I have an issue with us delaying it based on the items that you have specified. However, I do want to caution that we will always have issues with the with having the staff in place to conduct these kinds of surveys or outreach to the family. That has always been a challenge for our school district, and it will continue to do so. So hopefully we will take this time as well, and I know that it is a very challenging time to put something in place that will help us ease this outreach at the time that we're ready to do so.
Thank you, Julia. Point well taken on my end. Mayor Rivera?
I don't have any issue, and I'd be glad to make the motion to send the letter to Desi for the continuance.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Patricia Mariano?
Yes, John, thank you. I just have a couple of questions. First of all, I agree with kind of combining the two, the turnaround with the SOA survey. I think we'll probably get some better feedback by doing that. But there were items in the SOA plan that were scheduled to begin at the beginning of the school year. So does that mean the funds that were coming into the district are going to be impacted if we delay submitting our plan? And what will that do to any activities or trainings or any support the staff is going to have come September?
So,
I can jump
Pat,
in.
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Superintendent.
Yeah, so I think we're sensitive to that. Those are the trade-offs of this particular challenge. To continue the engagement has trade-offs right now, given the time we're in. And so we have to consider that. Do we expand the engagement and wait until the summer or until we reopen? And that does have implications for the plan that we have drafted and for your consideration. So you're absolutely right. This will have implications on that.
And what about funding? Will that delay the funds coming into the district if we delay submitting our plan?
I'm unclear about that and can't answer that given the uncertainty of the current deadline. There isn't one right now. So I'm not sure how to answer that.
So Pat, let me say what I'm going to do in wording the motion is say that we would request from Desi to extend the deadline until October 15th at the latest, but we will get guidance from Desi about whether these the deadline would then impact receipt of funds in any way. And if that is the case, we can come back to the board in short order and recognizing that we'll have made a request until October 15th at the latest, we could adjust it to, as the superintendent said, June, July, August. I think what we know though is that we need at least a few months if we want to get the student and family outreach right. I also think it is safe to say, given what DESE has communicated through this special legislation, that delaying it a few months at the minimum shouldn't affect that. What we need to get clarity on is whether, and a delay until October would.
I was just concerned about, there's a good amount of professional development for the staff that needs to occur. And if that doesn't happen, do we lose the whole year next year as far as, things we were going to put into place as a result of that Student Opportunity Act? And I understand that's the trade-off, but it's too bad in the request if we couldn't ask, and I don't know if this is looking for pie in the sky.
Pat, I'm saying that we can ask that. We'll set October 15th as the outside date for submission. We'll ask DESE for guidance on when things have to be received. And DESE will tell us, by the way, like if you submit it then, you're going to lose out on X, Y, or Z, or maybe not. And they'll tell us the dates by when we need to do things to be eligible. And I think based on the fact that they are creating, indefinite extensions in the first place is indicative that they're not going to be looking to penalize districts on any of this. So what I'm trying to do is create flexibility here to get the student and family outreach that we need, but also do our due diligence so we don't lose out on things.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John.
Yep. No, and I appreciate exactly where you're coming from on that. Noemi Custodia, Laura?
I don't have any comments at this point. Thank you.
Thanks. Jessica Anders?
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of this. I mean, I kind of feel like the SOA stuff and the turnaround stuff should have been meshed to begin with, and I think we need the extra time to properly outreach students and families. So I think we should do it. I definitely think we should, when we submit the petition, and we should get that clarification that you and Pat have just discussed, and then, if we need to refine that decision somewhat, we can do that, but I'm in favor of this.
Thank you, Jess. I'm going to put a motion in the chat room, a motion to request that DESE extend LPS's Student Opportunity Act application deadline until October 15th at the latest in order to conduct more in-depth student and family outreach. That would be, the chair would entertain that motion, and I will just clarify that when we, if approved, when we make the request to DESE, we will seek clarification on whether there would be any loss of funding, programming, or reasons to accelerate the deadline to a shorter time frame, in which case we will bring it back to the board. So the chair would entertain a motion to request that DESE extend LPS's Student Opportunity Act application deadline until October 15th at the latest in order to conduct more in-depth student and family outreach.
So moved.
Second.
I have it.
Discussion?
Yep, Mayor Rivera.
So just something really small, just because I know that Pat was concerned about some of the stuff that was in the plan that we haven't okayed yet. And I just wanted to be clear about this. This is the extension that's going to give us time to get more information. And some of those things that were programmed in the plan might not happen. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about this, that I know that we are missing this thing out. I mean, the reality is about money or time. It would be hard pressed for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts not to give one of its only 3 receivership communities all the money that it's supposed to be promised, deadlines notwithstanding, considering that this community had a gas crisis and then this crisis. And so, I'm not trying to make excuses for us, but, if they have the 20 million to give, which again, it's not 100% that they will have the 20 million to give this year, whatever it's supposed to be, they'd be hard pressed after doing all this work not to give it to us because we are, a month or 2 late on the plan, given all that we are dealing with today. So I just want to put it all out there, but I wanted to make that one clear point that part of the extension is to get inputs that might change the plan as we saw it the other day.
Thank you, Mayor Rivera. It's points well taken. We have a motion on the floor. A yes vote will be in support of the motion to make the requested extension. A no vote will be against the request to DESE for the extension. Joan, could you call the roll?
Yes. Mayor Rivera,
Yes.
Julia Severio,
Yes.
Jess Andors,
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez is absent. Tricia Mariano,
Yes.
Noemi Custodia Laura,
Yes.
and Chair Conley.
Yes.
So we have 6 yeses, 0 nos, 1 absent.
The motion passes 6-0, 1 absent. Thank you, Joan. Much appreciated. At this time, I'm going to move on to the last item in the chair's report, which is a superintendent review update. And this is just a reminder that we are approaching the next step in the superintendent review for the current cycle, which will be the mid-year review. And I will have a full update on that at the May meeting, and we'll circulate some materials prior to that. Before we move, well, let me ask, are there any questions on that?
All set.
Great, thank you, everyone. All right, but I'm going to take up other business at this time. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on March 11th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Julia Silverio, seconded by Patricia Mariano. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Great. At this time, I will go through the list one more time here for any final comments, any items, news, business, anyone wishes to mention at this time. Jess Anders?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Noemi Custodia Laura?
No, I'm okay. Thank you. No comments.
Thank you. Patricia Mariano?
All set. Thank you.
Thanks. Mayor Rivera?
No, I just want to say thank you, everybody on the LAE board and all the staff and the superintendent staff and herself, all the work they're doing to try to figure this thing out while trying to teach our kids while they're at home and trying to make this thing that is not really normal. There is some joy coming from this effort, and I just wanted to say that I've seen it, and I wanted them to know that we appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Julia Silverio?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Joseph Trinidad?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent, any final comments or anything you'd like to say?
I just want to say, I want to appreciate all your comments and thoughtful questions and feedback this evening. And as I said earlier, we are ready and willing to continue to work with our family and students and staff. We're incredibly proud of the efforts that they are making right now. We will continue to update you on this crisis and all of our efforts. I want to thank Mayor Rivera once again for his generosity and continued support as we together figure this out day by day.
Thank you, Superintendent. I just in closing want to extend a big thanks to Superintendent Paris and Mayor Rivera for their great leadership in this crisis. I think there's something special about Laurentians, and I mean that sincerely because it feels as though for my entire tenure on this board that Lawrence deals with one very serious crisis to the next, none of which through its own doing, but somehow everybody keeps moving forward and has a great toughness and resolve, but also maintains a great positivity. And it is something special about Lawrence because you don't see it everywhere. And I feel blessed to get to witness it and see it so often. And I think it's a great testament to the leadership in the city, in the schools, and most especially to the students and families in Lawrence. Lastly, just housekeeping, I want to mention the first budget subcommittee hearing is Monday, April 13th. So just 5 days away. If it works for everyone, I'm going to hold that one at 4 p.m. So I am just wondering if there's anyone here who feels like they won't be able to make that. It's open to all LAE members, but we'll just remind you that the members of the budget subcommittee are myself, Pat, Julia, Mayor Rivera, and Ventura.
I'm all set with 4.
Would 4 p.m. on Monday work for that subcommittee hearing? Anybody?
What date?
Monday, April 13th.
That works for me.
It's my calendar as well.
Great. And I know Ventura is celebrating Passover, so I'm unable to be with us tonight, but I will double check with him. But just knowing that 4 of the 5 members will be present, I'm going to move forward with the budget subcommittee hearing Monday, April 13th at 4 p.m. If LAE members who aren't on that subcommittee wish to take part, that is absolutely welcome. Okay, thank you, everybody. Greatly appreciate it. At this time, Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have it moved by the Mayor Rivera, seconded by Julia Silverio. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We next meet, the budget subcommittee will next meet Monday, April 13th. We are adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Dave and tech folks and Joan and everybody who's making this happen. I owe you guys huge thanks. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, guys.
You guys.